So here is that bloody head photo. You remember that? ABC probably paid a pretty good penny for that one. And you can see George is on the phone there. At least it looks like he's on the phone, right? It's not definitive, but it looks like his arm there. It looks like he's on the phone, right? And what's important about this photo is the metadata. It's coming up here in a second. Come on, Matt Gutman. Hey, Matt Gutman, where you been at anyways, brother? You in hiding or something? Alright, so let's look at this timestamp. 7/19/07. Look at that, right? So one thing about the timeline that I've been waiting for, and I can't believe they haven't released it yet, is the event report from the 911 caller that has the screams on it. And once we get that, we will know the exact time, if it is in the same format, which I assume it would be. Hoping it would be. We should have this at the top of that report. And that will tell us exactly when that call came in. Then we will know the exact time between when George ended his call to very close to when the fight started. And we'll know the exact time. So that's one thing I've been waiting for. Now, we may know, we look at that bloody head photo and the timestamp, and when George looks to be on the phone there, this hardly ever gets talked about. This is the second one that's on here. A lot of people thought that this was just like a repeat of the first one, and it looks like it, right? They just put in the same information. It's hard to we need somebody that actually works there, that understands these reports and how they're created. But you look at the time, and look at that, 7:20. Then we go back to that other photo, right? 7:19. Now there's probably going to be a discrepancy between this iPhone, that witness's iPhone, and the Seminole County Sheriff's dispatch line. But they're pretty darn close, aren't they? So that tells me we've pretty much had at least the time, all this time, between when George made his call. Now, in his statements, I thought I remember him saying something about calling. I'll have to go back and listen for when that is. Calling after the fight. But in another statement, he says that the cops showed up right away. I mean, folks, look, if there wasn't discrepancies in his story, then everyone would be complaining the other way around. Oh, look at his story is so perfectly consistent that it must be scripted. So he must be lying. So George can't win either way. You realize that. I think a lowly apprentice asked me if I think George is lying, and I said, sure. I don't think I said this part. I don't know. I just don't know how. You could say that someone's lying, but you have to show how, right? If you can't really show it, then all you're doing is calling somebody a poopy head, and anybody can do that, right? Anybody can, oh, poopy head, okay. Yeah, that really means a lot. But his story, over all the reports, is consistent. It's just not perfect. He's clearly confused as to when Trayvon came up to his truck, and if you look at the recreation video, when he's up near that cut-through, parked near that cut-through, he mentions the hands in the waistband thing. Well, we know when that happened in the call. For him to try to remember exactly where he was in that call, I mean, that would be a miracle for him to remember that stuff. And the Flexicon shows me a video of a cop. I don't think he's working as a cop anymore, and he's telling his story of a shooting that he had. Pretty interesting story. And if you just listen to that guy telling that story, even within his own telling of the story, he tells you the things that he got wrong, that he didn't remember. And that's a cop. That's someone who's trained, right? And even there's stuff that he thought he shot once at first, and he didn't. He shot twice. He thought he only shot 4 times. Oh, he really shot 7 times. And on it goes like that. You can catch all his own little discrepancies just in that one story alone. Imagine what you get that recorded statement and listen to his other recorded statements and his written reports. Compare them all together. I bet you're going to see discrepancies all over the place from a cop. So, I mean, come on now. It's ridiculous. Now, I'm not saying that is an excuse for George. Obviously, his memory is horrible. And I'm not saying, oh, that's a cover for lies. No. I'm saying that's a reality, folks. That's a reality that you have to deal with. So you have to show he's lying. And then what's another one the Flexican likes to bring up? Oh, the bushes. George said he jumped out of the bushes in one tape, but in another statement, he said he didn't know or whatever. Well, yeah, if you listen to the whole tape, as I was telling you about inference, logic, epistemology, look it up. He obviously inferred from this situation that's what happened. Because when he first passed that T, he didn't see him, right? And when he came back, there he was. So what? Did the aliens drop Trayvon down in that spot at that time? If he said something like that, we might as well sign this off right now. Right? But he didn't say that. He inferred from the fact that he knew there was bushes there and fences and things to hide behind, that he was probably hiding by that. And he even says it. He even says that in the tape if you listen. That he figured it was that. He wasn't sure. He figured it must have been something like to that effect. Good grief. Come on, listen to the damn tapes. So this is part of what you do have to do in order to try to fit everything together and see what's going on. There's a lot of things that George doesn't remember. He doesn't. I don't think listening to all those statements and reading what he wrote in his one written statement, I can't remember him once mentioning that he thought Trayvon may have been going to the back gate, like he says in the call. He doesn't remember he thought that. I mean, obviously he doesn't know where Trayvon lived, so he wouldn't think that he's going back there. It just happened to be happenstance that that's where he lived, in that direction. But he doesn't even mention that. Is that a lie? Not necessarily. So I mean, this is part of what you have to do. I mean, so we know, well, we don't know for sure. I'm waiting for that damn one event report. We know that this time has passed. George calls at 7:09:34. He ends his call there, 4 minutes and a few seconds later. And we get the bloody head photo at 7:19:07, and George on the phone at the same time, it looks like. So these times look pretty close together enough to say that that's probably around, well, we could say definitely 7:20, in between the ending of the call and when George called again, if that is true. So what are we looking at there, folks? Looks to me we're looking at actually 7 minutes, right? Yeah. 7 minutes between when he ends his call and when he calls back again. So we go ahead and throw Dee in there, and the T-Mobile time is more than likely not going to be synced with the Seminole County Sheriff Dispatch line. But this is the minute mark. Anywhere within that 7:15 minute mark is where that call ends. Right? Supposedly they're on the phone together. I mean, so that 911 caller is going to be the one that matters because, well, no. A question mark. We don't know what time that came in. It's a mystery. If we look here, if this is correct, right? Why are the cops saying they showed up at 7:17? Stuff like that. When they really showed up what appears to be sometime after 7:20. Maybe even as close as to 7:21. I don't know. So if you're looking for holes, well, that's one, isn't it? I mean, I don't remember him talking much about that witness that came out and actually took a photo, 3 photos, by the way. All we know of, well, I can't remember what he said in his statement. I think he took a photo of Trayvon and maybe 2 photos of George. I don't know. We know of one, which he probably got paid pretty good money for, didn't you, guy? No doubt. I mean, so, but what does it mean for the case? Oh, I don't know. I don't talk about the legal aspect. I'll leave that for the legal people. Speaking of liars, did you notice this whole thing going back on the passport thing? And what they included in their motion to revoke bond. Did you pay attention? Did you read critically? For lexicon? Look at this now. They're talking about this jailhouse call. Out of the many, many hours of calls, this is what they pull out. 4 big old... No, I'm sorry. 2. 3 lines. This is what they pull out. And this is why they think George is lying. Shelley says, "Oh, I have one for you in the safety deposit box." And George says, "Okay, you hold on to that." And Shelley says, finishing her sentence, "For you." So she meant to say, "I have one for you in the safety deposit box." I'm sorry. I have one for you. What the hell? They screwed that up. "I have one for you in safety deposit box for you." These people are nuts. Okay, so they hear that and they're like, "Oh, he's got 2 passports. He's gonna run." Come on, man. And you go listen to the call. This is the conversation. "George, I think my passport's in that bag." "Oh, really? Well, I have one in a safety deposit box." And she's about to say, "For you," but he cuts her off. He says, "Okay, you hold on to them." This, them, right, is a typo. If you listen, not a typo, but a mistranslation. If you listen to the tape, he says, "You hold on to that." That's what he says. Okay? Now, we have some options here. Some options, folks. That's how it works. Because it's not definitive of what's being said here. Now, I know this is all a moot point anyway, since the judge just tossed this aside. But it's a good example of how, well, I can't say that the state is lying in this regard. I can say in other regards, we got definite proof that they are lying about witness number 2. But this just goes to show how they are at least at best, misinterpreting what's being said here. It could be that he's aware that he has 2, and he's keeping one in order to make his mad dash for the border. But somehow I doubt it, right? We don't see that in here. When we look at this, see what could the options be? Okay, well, let's look what she says. "I think what does he say? "I think my passport is in that bag, right?" And she says, "Oh, really? Well, I have one in a safety deposit box for you." So is she saying there, "Oh, well, I have a second one? I have the second one?" Or is she saying, "Well, I'm confused, George. I think that the one we have for you is in the safety deposit box. There seems to be some confusion about that, right? It could go either way. Now, what's important here, what does he do? He interrupts her when she says, oh, really? Well, I have one in a safety deposit box. And he interrupts her and says, okay, you hold on to that. Now, is he thinking that she's talking about her passport? And he's like, well, you hold on to that? Or is he thinking, oh, you're right, it's probably not in that bag. It's probably in the safety deposit box, so you hold on to that. Right? What the fuck is he saying? You see, it could legitimately be anything like that. It is not necessarily what the state thinks it is. But yet, and this is the important part, folks, I know the judge threw it out, it didn't matter. Yet, that this is what they're going to conclude from, that they're big fat liars. See? Nothing could be further from the truth, they say. Mwahaha. Well, you know what? It could be. It could be that's what was going on. But what I'm saying here is that the state, again, has not made its case. It is not convincing at all. These 3 lines that they take, well, it's not even 3 lines, really. It's 2. And they can't even get that right. They got that right. That's right. But it's ridiculous to think from these 2 lines from that jailhouse call that there's some big plot to run away, stash the passport and lie to the court. Whoa. But I mean, it just, and that's the whole thing, right? It's all interpretation, multiple interpretations of what it may be or may not be, and that's so much of what this case is about. When people hear that non-emergency call that George placed, well, if you're Puro, you hear a madman. If you're Natalie Jackson, you hear, obviously, a racist must be on that phone, right? Natalie? Certainly. Well, you get these different interpretations. You have to literally be in the mind of George at the time when he's talking about Trayvon wearing the hoodie and looking like he's on drugs or something. Is he truly stereotyping? Or does he really, truly think that? And if it was a non-black and saw the exact same things, would he really, truly think that as well? You don't know. You don't know. You think you know. You talk as if you know, but you don't know. And I know that you don't know. Maybe the masses don't, but I do. And I love how people talk about their distrust of all these power-hungry state attorneys and things of that nature, and all of a sudden, all that goes away. Every word is believed from these very same people. It's clear that their zeal for getting George is, like I said, it's apparent. I mean, simple as that, really. But in the end, legally, it's all meaningless anyways, because the state is all charging on everything that happened before the actual confrontation, really. I mean, and their case is just weak as hell, as far as I can tell. I'm not a lawyer, but judging from what all the other lawyers are saying, except for Crump and Jackson, of course, yes. But aside from those lawyers, every other lawyer seems to be saying this is a weak ass case. So good luck to them. Look for justice and moving forward. Right, Natalie? Looking for that progress. Progressing. But hey, it's fun for us, right? It's fun for us because we get to tell a story and argue about it. We'll see what happens. 3 more days, right, till the other bond hearing. Let's see what other motions might come up. I think after that bond hearing, I might go get the subscription to the Discovery that I've been booted out of and see what else is in there. The news isn't going to really release in any good manner. Oh, and I guess people aren't satisfied with me or I have talked about this plenty in the past and have written on it on other sites and such, but I mean, the whole money thing. Look, at some point, obviously, George decided, right? He said, "Look, we need this money for that. I want to hear all the calls, right? I want to hear all the calls because I want to see if he talks about that in this way. That we need the money for this. We need it for our future lawyer. We need it for being in fucking hiding and not being able to get a job and shit like that." So it's like, and I want to know this right here. Where'd it go? Let's see if I can find this. This one right here. Defense counsel submitted a letter on 5/18 with documents to this court explaining the money the defendant had available. That's what I want to know, what they filled out there. I don't know where that is, even if we have that. I'll have to try to find that. Now, clearly, she knew that there was money, right? But again, it's about interpretation. It's obviously this can be interpreted in different ways. O'Mara says any other major assets that you have that you can liquidate, right? That she has. And at some point, like I said, George probably told her, well, we need that money for, the lawyer and getting houses for everybody. What if they rent out some house for their parents for a month and shit like that? That money's going to be gone within weeks. Weeks that money will be gone. That's what he's thinking about. So he made what sounds like a bad decision. Because apparently, now this is the other thing. This is really important. Does he know exactly that he's supposed to declare that money? Or does he think he can just declare some of it? Or does he, what does he know in regards to that, right? The thing is, what I focus on is, did O'Mara make it clear to him? And which apparently he did not do. Listening to those calls, it sounds like O'Mara and George hardly have any contact at all while he's in jail. So how much is he really talking to him about bond money and stuff? I think probably very little. And what's really weird about this whole thing is that O'Mara appears to have been in contact with Ken. That was his name, right? Or that's probably her brother-in-law? Shelly's brother-in-law. And the one running the actual PayPal site is in contact. Why is he in contact with O'Mara? It was just as much O'Mara's responsibility, folks, as it was George's to make sure that this was all known. Now, you read some of these and play, oh, well, he was not indigent. Oh, obviously not. He had all that money. His lawyer charges $400 an hour. If he worked full time for, a month and a half, that money would be gone. A month and a half. He's already been on it for how many months now? Since April 11th? So let's see. Now look at that. Are you of any financial means where you can assist in those costs? Now, if she's thinking about that money, all right, that money's sitting in the bank, right? But George is like, look, we need that money for this, we need that money for that. And, it's going to cost 10 grand for the new house, it's going to cost this for that. Is she thinking at that time, well, that she herself doesn't have any? Because when he got out, if you look at the accounts, that money all gets moved again. Right, so obviously there was something, and another 10 grand to that other lady. Who's that other lady? Yeah, just give her 10 grand. He's throwing 10 grand around to people like it's Christmas. It seems like he's trying to take care of everybody and everything, buying bulletproof vests for everyone and all that bullshit. Oh, that reminds me of what people are saying. Oh, the joke about, what was it? Oh, the hoodie. It was supposed to be a hoodie joke. I suppose it was supposed to be an indifferent joke about Trayvon. Again, folks, interpretation. You can interpret that, what they said on that phone call, in different ways. Because in the middle, I should go look that up. Let me see if I can find that one. And I mean, there's so much. Look at, you could talk. Let me get to the other part in a moment. But look at this. I mean, they're talking about getting cheap with their, I don't know, buying a cell phone or whatever the fuck or something, and see TJ Maxx first to see how cheap they are, and then Sam's Club to double check, and they're laughing about that shit. And well, you guys are thinking, oh my god, he's got a windfall here, right? He's so rich. But look at how they're talking, right? It's ridiculous, man. They're still thinking like poordoms, right? I know that talk. I know that talk well. Alright, anyways, here's that hoodie comment, right? Yeah, exactly. Well, I have my hoodie. And kind of gives almost like a little, not a kind of an exasperated chuckle about it almost. But I mean, if you look at it in context, you can see that this can also easily be interpreted as the absurdity of the situation that they're in when they're talking about this kind of caper here of renting vehicles and getting bulletproof vests and getting the right hotel with a garage attached, and very out of the ordinary behavior of what they have to live through. And they're talking about, well, what did she say? Well, you could lay down or something like in the movies. Oh, get your head down, right? And he makes this comment, well, I have my hoodie. Like, in the face of all that, right, that's really going to help much. It could easily be interpreted that way. That's what I thought when I heard it the first time, before I even read about what people were saying. Oh, it's supposed to be a indifferent comment about Trayvon. And speaking of that, I preempted before about George's comments that they probably have in text messages. I'm thinking, now I covered the racist angle, that he probably said some racist shit on there. And we got to remember the time frame from when they took his texts. It was after it started hitting the major media. Why they decided to take it there, I don't know. Why didn't they get his texts from the day, well, the cops had his cell phone. Well, he must have had another one, or they gave it back or something. I don't know. But for some reason, they didn't get the texts for that first few days. In the first week, they got it from March 7th. And then for the following 3 weeks or something like that, I'll have to look again. But they concentrated on that for some reason. Of course, that's when he's getting slammed in the media everywhere and becomes the new Bin Laden. I mean, what the fuck? So obviously he's going to say some shit in there, I bet. But I would be surprised if there wasn't some racist shit. But the second thing is, he might even mention Trayvon in there and might say some shit. And you think about the situation, if we say, oh, okay, everything that George says is true and actually how it happened, assuming that. I know that's hard for the Trayvonites to do. Well, impossible for them. But anybody on the fence or anything like that, if we get some text saying some shit about Trayvon, yeah, if you put, and everything is true as he said, then I mean, how would you interpret that, right? How would you say that? What if he said some shit, like, oh, the little fucker attacked me, right? And he puts that term there at the beginning. Everyone's gonna concentrate on that the whatever derisive term he may have used and say, aha, see, he He had a depraved mind. No, because the media is out there sanctifying Trayvon, putting out a completely false reality of who Trayvon was at the time of the shooting, right? According to the media, he's a 12-year-old little boy that can't wait to fly planes and all that bullshit. Well, what was he doing for the past year? Where it's reportedly that he's got 50-plus absences from school. At least 3 suspensions, the last one being 10 days. 10 days. Was that really for the weed? Because there's that text that's reportedly supposed to be Trayvon's, whoever, cousin. I'm not sure who it was. I don't know. It's got to be verified, though. Saying that he hit a bus driver. What is that? Is that sounds like something that would more constitute a suspension than if the baggie of weed didn't really contain any weed in it. I don't know, though. You have to look. People have been looking at the school, the system of what constitutes a suspension, especially a long one like that. 10 days is long. 2 weeks. That's a long time to be missing school. Oh, but he's supposed to be an honor roll student, right? He's supposed to be an honor roll student. Missing that much school. He must be a genius. Must be a genius to be able to miss that much school and be in honors. Well, we know what that's all about. That's the school system trying to do away with tracking and shit like that. That's what's going on. Of course, I mean, we ask the obvious questions. Look, if he's so stellar of a student, right? Because this is all people are like, well, oh, you're just racist and bashing on the victim. Don't do that to the victim. Well, it's not about that, you see. Right? It's about the perceptions. The perceptions of what the reality is. And Crump and company and Juliuson and Natalie Jackson and Martin family, they all wanted to put out a very specific perception right from the beginning of this whole thing. There was nothing grassroots about this movement, folks. It was all crafted from the beginning. Anyways, I mean, they even talk about it. Oh, Juliuson, the great mastermind, puppeteer, spin doctor, right? That's what I call him anyways. Because that's what he is, right? This is not the reality. That's what spin doctors do. They spin the reality. What was I saying? So that's the perception is what we're talking about here. And that's why we're talking about it. Not necessarily to say, oh, blaming the victim. Oh, I love that one. Blaming the victim. Yeah, well, yeah, that victim, if it's all true, attacked somebody. And they say, well, couldn't Trayvon have been standing his ground? Well, I don't know. He seems to have run away for at least 2 minutes and came back. And George wasn't doing anything wrong. George had every right to be there where he was. George had a right to look into somebody who was standing on somebody else's property. And that's something that some people try to dismiss by saying, oh, that's common where kids who walk through there. Well, yeah, well, maybe that's true. But there's also somebody's property right there. Oh, they say, oh, it's Frank Taffy's property. Yeah. So what? Is there some insinuation there? Are you trying to say something nefarious is going on? Where's your evidence? They never have any evidence. That's what's so sad about it. They never got any evidence. He's still standing there on somebody's property in the rain. What the hell is he doing? Well, if he's the 12-year-old little boy that we all hear about, clearly he had to have been running scared for his life. Well, how do you explain him going back? That doesn't make any sense. I've talked about all that before. So, yeah, but going back to this bond hearing thing, I mean, we'll see what happens with this new bond. But people are like talking about, oh, the credibility. Well, he knew the money was there. She knew the money was there. Yeah, but how did they think of that money is what matters. It seems like that they thought they had a choice. And then it wasn't nefarious. Oh, but they're talking in code. What's so absurd about that? Okay, yeah, they're talking in code. Sure. But why? Is it because they really think that the recorded call couldn't be figured out by anybody listening? Did they really think that? Because they even have a call there, which I point out is just so absurd. They have a call there, and the state even mentions this, where they're talking to the banker. I mean, why are you putting... This is just so absurd. I'm telling you, I just don't... I'm not convinced. I know that they knew that there was money, and that they were saying that, look, we don't have any money. But they didn't really say it that way, though, did they? That's not what the questioning is different. And to understand what is really the problem, right? And when you hear the judge talk about it, well, George can't sit there like a potted palm. What was he supposed to? That's what I don't understand. So that's the crime? He didn't jump up there in court and say something the second Shelley Zimmerman mentioned one of these, or this whole thing. What was he supposed to do? Did he know he was supposed to do something? Did he know he was supposed to speak up at that moment and say, "Oh, Your Honor, we do have some money, but I was trying to keep that aside for all these exorbitant amount of costs. That is something that most people will never go through in their lives in this situation. Having the entire media and the masses wanting to murder you and shit, right?" I mean, the media in effect, not in reality. But certainly plenty of the masses in reality do. So he can't get a job. He can't even go to the store. So that's the whole thing, is what I'm talking about. Yes, I realize that they know they had the money, but I'm trying to find out what he was supposed to do and when he was supposed to do it, and how that was wrong. Was it when they filled out this thing at the beginning here they're talking about? Right? The documents, is that what they're talking about? It's not very clear exactly what they were supposed to do when. And how, legally that matters, right? Oh, and it was so funny, too. Somebody over at the Treehouse was saying, George's father should have told... This is so funny. I can't believe they said this. George's father should have told George to tell his wife... And she literally said this. I couldn't believe it. To tell his wife to tell her to tell the truth. And sure to fuck enough, what do you think he told her that day on a jailhouse call? Pray and tell the truth before you go in there, right? Pray and tell the truth. That's what he tells Shelley. That's what O'Mara's going to bring in at this new bail hearing. So this person is trying to criticize George and say, his father should have told him to say this. And that's exactly what he said. Yeah. See, it pays to know, to be so delved into the details of this story and all the dynamics of it. So you know that. You have that information, right? And you can put it in people's faces and they just go away. What can they say? Come back and call you a poopy head. That's about all they can do. So, I mean, look, like I said, a lowly apprentice asked me if I think George is lying. Sure, he may very well, he has to be lying somewhere, right? But you have to show it. You have to show it. And if you can't really show it, if you go like the route of the state here and give me two lines of hours and hours and hours of calls and say that is what it means, You're going to have to do better than that, baby. Gonna have to do better than that. Man, so there's so much to talk about. I'm trying to put together my new timeline with the little graphics and such. It takes forever, and you have to really be careful and looking at those statements and listening to those statements, and you have to listen to them all in order, and you have to write down all the details of the important this and that, the important parts, and compare what's off and what's not, and what matters and what doesn't, and you have to then take all of that into account all together and weigh it all and try to piece it all together. Because like I said, for anybody to think, unless you have a photographic memory, to think that you can remember, even if it was the day before or 2 days before or whatever, exactly where you were in a phone call when you said what you said and all of this and that, well, that'd be a fucking miracle. And that just, it's ridiculous. But like I said, it doesn't matter anyways. I mean, to the Trayvonites and them, like I said, George is damned if he does or damned if he doesn't. If he came out with a perfect solid story as Piero, oh, you better be solid. Well, if he was completely solid through every statement, then Piero would have been coming out saying, oh, look, his statements are obviously memorized and manufactured and scripted. So, I mean, that's just the way it goes. So, and I can't believe, for somebody who supposedly has studied philosophy of all things, doesn't understand memory and epistemology and all that bullshit and all the problems that come in with that. I can't believe that somebody would be talking on this case, looking at those statements and be saying, oh, see? George is a liar. Yeah, okay. Okay, so I guess the cop, too, right? I like to mention that one, the cop, and I'm not going to pull up the report and all this stuff, just talking about it. The cop in the report, there's misreporting all in that report. One of the cops says that Trayvon was wearing light-colored shorts. Light-colored shorts. That's what Trayvon was wearing. He's not the only one that says that. But is he lying? Is the cop lying? That's why I ask Flexican, but he can never answer. Is he lying? I'm talking to you, Flexican, here about all this stuff. Bond and monies and everything else. Telling you what I think about it. But, I mean, come on now. I mean, a lie is hard to detect, isn't it? When there's an actual lie. You know, it's hard to find out. Unless you get an admission. That's one way to tell. Another way to tell is an obvious lie, like I said, always mention about the state. And that's what I find so fucking funny about this shit, man, folks. Come on. This whole thing, if you step back at the larger picture about this bond hearing stuff, right? And how George is supposedly trying to hide his money from the court to get a lower bond, right? So that's the game we're playing here, right? That he's doing that in order to get a lower bond. So step back, get a God's eye view of looking down at the whole situation. And the game is, one side is trying to get a lower bond, and the other side is trying to get a higher bond, or no bond at all, right? That's the prosecution side. That's the game. We're going to throw that ball back and forth. And what's the big ball that the state throws at the judge to get a higher bond? What's that big ball, folks? That big ball was witness number 2, and how they said numerous times throughout that bond hearing to get a higher bond. What did they say? We got a witness that says there was a chase. They are in close proximity to each other, and this is why we're doing all this. Because this is all the stuff that led up to the fight, which we don't care about. We have no evidence to contradict George's story, so we're not going to go after the actual fight and all that bullshit, right? No, it's all before the fight. And that witness number 2, even though they never actually saw the supposed people they saw running, just figures, it just wouldn't make sense, at least to them, because of their interpretation, and we see how that works. Their interpretation is, oh, that must be George chasing Trayvon down, right? But what happens? What happens? They re-interview him. Thank God they did that. They re-interview that witness. And are we talking about some addition or some discrepancy here and there? Hell no. We're talking about a massive change in the story. Massive change. That's the thing, that's you get to weigh these things in some sort of weighty manner, which of course is going to be subjective. So when you're listening to George and you compare his discrepancies in his stories to this witness number 2, and weigh those together and see which one's more weighty. You look at, like I was talking about with the Bushes, that's clearly just an inference that George made. If you listen to the call, he even says it, right? Or you listen to the interview, he even says it in that manner. But this witness, what does she say? It completely changes from not even a chase, but possibly of one person that might have been running because she heard footsteps. That is a massive change in testimony. If they didn't do that re-interview, we would have never known that, because before Serino filed his request for arrest on the 13th, and she wasn't re-interviewed till I think 2 weeks later or something like that. I'll have to look it up, by the prosecutor. So Serino really believed, well, at least had that. He included that in his report, the chase. Even though he later reported in there about, well, it was just a glance without her glasses or contacts. He got that much in there, but not the whole change of the story. So if we had just that first, if she said that the first time, they would never be able to mention a chase. But they did, didn't they? Stepping back, looking at the whole game, trying to raise the bond on George. And what'd they do? They really lied. They didn't mention, they knew about her changing her story. Now that is a lie. That's how you spot a lie. When you actually know the story, right? We know the story of Witness 2. We know that. O'Mara didn't know that. O'Mara's sitting in court and he doesn't know. The judge doesn't know. Come on, folks. That's how you spot a lie. Well, that's a fucking lie. And that's what the state did. Oh, but they're the good guys in all this, right? Yeah. Right. And I was supposed to look at that and then look at this situation with George trying to keep some money aside, and I'm supposed to say that he's worse than them? What am I supposed to say to that? I mean, come on, man. I'm trying to look at the situation as a whole. Everybody wants to focus on one little point here or there. But look, in the end, I said, yeah, if he actually knew that he was trying to deceive the court, even though O'Mara says there is nothing in all of the calls, nothing that says that. There's nothing that says that. I mean, if George is supposed to be so stupid, then how could he not slip up like that? Oh, which reminds me too, I told this to Flexican, one of my favorite parts of that interview with Serino was when Serino was bluffing. Well, he probably doesn't know he's bluffing. He even says that to George about, well, he probably knows he's bluffing. Who knows, right? But he says to George, oh, this kid, he liked to record himself a lot. That was one of his hobbies. Oh, he did? I'd like to see some of those recent recordings myself, by the way. I don't think we're going to get them, though. But ABC, if they were really interested, might actually go around and get pay some pretty pennies for stuff, right? But they're only going to concentrate on George's side. Anyways. So, and what did George say? Oh, so Serino says, yeah, so there may be something on his cell phone, of recording that event. And what does George say? Well, I pray there is. I pray there is something on there. And you know what? And he said, what else he said? Oh, or anything else, any other tape in the neighborhood that might have caught it, because he said he didn't know that they had that camera, whatever. When they called in one interview when he was sitting there trying to get the tapes. So he's like, yeah, I hope they got something on tape. What kind of a guilty person says that? What kind of a guilty person says, yeah, I hope you got it on tape, because you're going to see. Come on, man. Really. I think so much of this is just misinterpreted to be what people want it to be. Right? Depending on what they are. And that's why I say it's so important that if you think he's lying, you really have to show it. And you're going to have to do better than this. Right? You're going to have to show the lie. I could show the lie. I could show the lie at the state. Can you show the lie of the George? The George. Can you? I don't think you can. I mean, all you got is, well, maybes. And then I agree. And I always tell George. Lexicon is George now. And I think that's one thing why the lexicon is was so emotionally damaged by the talking in code by George. I think he sees a lot of himself in George, or vice versa, or whatever like that. The American dream and the cop thing. Oh, that was the other thing about the cop too, about everyone talking about how the cop wannabe. Yeah, he did consider wanting to be a cop. George did. But I don't know if he actually applied anywhere like Flexicon thinks. I don't know if he actually applied anywhere. Why? What was the story there that he told Sereno? Oh, I love it. This is just great. Why did he not want to be a cop, George? Because the kids who he's dealing with, who he had interactions with, who he's trying to help and stuff like that, they think cops are assholes. That's right. That's what he tells Sereno. Oh, no offense, guys, but they think you're assholes. And I really didn't want to be that asshole. Yeah, that's what he tells them. That's why he didn't want to be a cop. Even though he was considering it. And that was part of the other motivation. The other part was, well, he thought he can make a better difference by not being the asshole. Oh, and now people will come and say, oh yeah, he made a difference, didn't he? Forgetting the assault. They always forget the assault. Oh, it was just a couple of nicks. Did you see all those abrasions all over his face? How do you get those? How do you get abrasions like that? They're not bruises, right? They're something else. They're abrasions. How do you get that all over the place? The head, the face, the cheeks, the chin. That means something else is going on there. That seems to give more validity to the idea of the attempting to smother and stuff. Oh, well, how can you hear those screams if he's smothering? Oh, I don't know. By moving your fucking face around in fright? Come on, man. You can hear some of those screams starting and stopping abruptly. So, I mean, yeah, it's not good enough to actually show, right? But, I mean, it is what it is. Take it for what it's worth. It's still not being able to show that it's a lie. But those abrasions. And it's amazing to me, what pisses me off about this case is that people talk about how, oh, look how the cops screwed up. They're covering up for George and all this. And they're covering up for George? Really? But they could have done a better job, don't you think? They could have, taken George's gun out of his holster and put Trayvon's fingerprints on it. Something like that. That would have been easy to do. They didn't do that, though. I mean, if you're really covering up for George, then they could have said, oh, look, see? He grabbed for the gun. You could see his prints on there because we put him on there, right? Oh, that didn't happen. That didn't happen. As a matter of fact, they screwed up for George, too. There's quite a few things that I noticed, and I'm not a cop. I'm not an investigator. Somebody else, I'm sure, with a lot of experience can look at what they did and didn't do and find out, oh, man, they should have done this, they should have done that, right? It looks just more like some incompetence to me, I would say, and not indifference to a black victim. Because one of the two things I like to point out in this regard is, what is it? The watch. I did not see, it may have happened somewhere, but I did not see a testing of the watch for blood first, right? Testing to see if there's blood on there, or even skin, right? Abrasions on the head and face area, and George's DNA. I didn't see that for the watch itself. I see they got it bagged or something and tagged, but I don't see a DNA test for it. It may exist. I don't know. They may have not included it in that first discovery dump. But if they didn't, well, that's a big screw up, because that could have been explained some of the abrasions on George's face and head, I would think. And so, what was the other one? Oh, where his head got banged. How could they not, at the scene, figure out that George's head was banged on the cement, and then try to find, because it's fucking raining, or about to rain, or intermittent rain, or whatever, how could they not find that spot? They probably could have, maybe, if they looked, but apparently they didn't look for that spot. They didn't look for that spot, which I assume is the edge of the sidewalk, the edge of it, and look for skin and blood, and again, taking photos and a swab sample for George's DNA. They didn't do that. Wow, how could they not do that? At least look, right? So don't tell me about, the indifference of the black victim, when obviously they could have done other things that would have helped the other victim. Oh, and the whole racial aspect too. Piro's like, what are you talking about? This whole race thing. I mean, if you can't see race throughout this whole thing, and that's what so much of this is based off of, man, you're ignorant. You're just ignorant of that. I'm not saying you're stupid. I hope people know when I say the word ignorant, I don't mean stupid. I mean just not informed of that. Oh, well, I know about inner city youth and all that. That's not what I'm talking about. That's not what I'm talking about. I'll do a piece on Natalie Jackson, and you can see. And I'll leave you a link to people who are already talking about Natalie Jackson. And looking at her tweets, you can just see it. It's plain as day. Plain as day. Trayvon is a vehicle, merely a means to an end. That's all he is. And Natalie Jackson says as much. And she's all good buddy with their what'd you say about the their Puro about what? Did you say Sharpton? Did you say Jesse Jackson? Who'd you say? Oh, they're racist, right? Ah. Yeah, well, same old same. That's all it is. Go read her tweets. Figure it out. Use your brain. Use the noodles, as Trayvon's cousin would say. Alright, so what the fuck else? Man, I'm just rambling on about different parts here. Yeah, I'll work on that. I've been working on it. Working on getting the timeline together. I really want that event report. And then I'll put a little display together, what the fuck animation stuff like I did before. Well, that was the other thing. I think it was Asymmetrical Warfare was asking me about if it's going to go to court. I have no doubt. Well, I have some doubt, of course. Can't be absolutely certain. But this case is so political now. I mean, right up there, the General Attorney Bondi, the Governor Scott, Congress people, even, of course, we go back to President. And that's the other thing, Puro. Even the president brings race into it. If I had a son, he'd look like Trayvon. That's race. That's what he's talking about. So, yeah, about going to court. I have no doubt. Like I said, I have some doubt that this is all purely political now. I wasn't ready to go all the way and say that this was purely political until they actually got rid of the chief of police there. Once they got rid of the chief of police with no explanation other than the community not having faith and trust or what the fuck ever bogus ass bullshit reason, right? Without that, without an actual good reason, we know that it was purely political. We know it was. There's no doubt about that now. So this case is based on political motivations. One facet of that being fear of riots. So there's that fear aspect there, but there's also not just the riots, but the effect of the riots, which will be, if George gets off, more than likely, will be billions of dollars in lost revenue for the state of Florida, on top of along with loss of production and of that nature, right? Work and all that. Billions will be lost. It was what do they report in Wiki there on the 92 riots? At least $1 billion in damages, and that was what? Just the damages? What about the loss of production and the cost to the state to send out National Guard and all that stuff, and the police and everything else, right? So you're looking at billions now for the state of Florida to be going negative, right? That's huge motivation, huge. And then of course the fear of riots itself, burning down the house. Yeah, huge motivation. And it speaks to that when the chief is fired with no reason. And I can't believe Geraldine over there at that Talk Left site talks about how she doesn't read anything into that. Well, because what? What did she say? Oh, well, it's because the city needs to move on or whatever. No, why? Why shouldn't it have from the beginning actually backed up the chief of police, saying, yeah, this is there's nothing nefarious going on here. So what's the problem? What's the problem? Oh, he's white. That's the problem. And the city of Sanford needs to move forward. Yeah. And heal. Okay, sure. Sure. So I have no doubt that it's gonna make its way to court. After that, then, well, it's up to a jury. And depending on how much media influence they have had, if they got the picture of the 12-year-old little boy running scared from the big, fat, evil racist in their minds, George don't have a chance in hell. So that's it. All right, I think I'm going to be done talking about this right now. Peace out, my brothers, sisters, and everyone in between.